everyone, Yasin here, and welcome to another episode of Pointy Chins, where I take you through my art journey. Alright, so here I was working on simplifying the figure, and this is something where I've thought a lot about making tutorials on how to simplify figures and stuff, because it's really useful. Especially when you're learning, you don't necessarily need to get all the anatomy in at once, or rather, I'm not saying anatomy is not good to understand. What I'm saying is, in the beginning, anatomy is a very complicated thing. And if you try and learn everything at once, it can be overwhelming. And so simplifying things so they're kind of more manageable, and I made a video called manageable chunks. Manageable chunks that kind of explains this thought, which is, if you have something complicated, break it down into simple things and then deal with each simple thing one at a time. But the reason why it's hard to teach how to simplify is because actually there's so many different ways of simplifying, and you can use a bunch of different ways. So here's just an idea of a few different ways of simplifying. So like with this figure, they're simplified in a certain way. And with this one, it's simplified similarly. So for instance, I think about this area as one thing, like the shoulder, including the upper arm and the shoulder, but how the shoulder kind of cuts in so that you get the pecs. But I could also think of it as the pecs and the shoulder are one thing as well. So you can change how you simplify it. So here, for instance, in this one, I thought of it where you have the ankle bone as a landmark, and then you have this kind of stirrup thing. I think this helps in getting the form of the foot, for instance, and then I think of these ones as one thing, and this kind of combined the same way as with the hand. I think of the thumb as one simplification thing, and then the fingers as another. And so when I draw this, I might draw like a mitten for the fingers and treat them like one thing, but then I'll treat the thumb separately. But you can also like simplify even further, and maybe just the heel is one part, and this, or I guess this one is the same as this one. But that's what I mean. Like, there's different ways of simplifying, and there's no real right way. You can simplify based on rhythms, which this one is more simplified based on rhythms, and you've got this rhythm from the head to the neck, through the rib cage, towards the crotch. So that's not necessarily anatomy, like simplifying based on anatomy. That's simplifying based on a way that it works and a rhythm you can see. And then something else that I find is very useful is to think of clothing and cut lines. So the reason I think this is useful is because we see people wearing clothes a lot more than we see them naked. And the clothing, where it's cut at times, does fall along natural rhythms. Like, if you think of this as like a bathing suit or something, this pink area, of course it's not going to go over the head, but it kind of helps to think of where the hips are. So here what's happening is I've isolated the rib cage, and then I've also got the obliques. Like, this kind of starts where the obliques start, and then that goes right into the legs. And so this whole region is simplified, but it's not like that's the way to simplify. It's just that's an effective way, especially if you kind of know some anatomy already. But even if you don't, I think it's helpful to sort of figure out these things. But the way you learn them best, I feel, or the way I learned them, I learned the forearm from a guy, Funky Monkey, who simplified the forearm into like just 3 or 4 muscles, which is good because there's a lot of muscles in the forearm. But the way I learned these simplifications, for instance, is just by doing tons of figure drawing. So by doing it a lot, you end up learning a lot. And here, for instance, I noticed that on the chest, there's kind of a space. This looks stupid. I hate this drawing, but I just wanted to explain this thing. And it's like the I called it the tidy whities of the chest, that there is this flat area on the chest, or more flat area. It's not completely flat. And then the breasts come out. So it's important when you draw someone who has breasts to remember that, yes, but they're not, like, the boobs don't start from up here and go all the way down. And that's what you sometimes see. And even I'm guilty of doing this, where you start the boobs up too high and you don't include this more flat portion of the chest. If a person's wearing something that pushes their breasts together and they have very large breasts, yes, you will get cleavage that goes very high. However, if you're not like pressing the breasts together, even if you have very large breasts, they're going to hang lower, but you will still have this like flatter region, and just happens to resemble the shape of underwear, like briefs. So that's how I do it. But yeah, that's that. And then here I was trying to do different designs, just practicing designing from imagination. But the trick was, first I wanted to start with a similar base for all of them, which is why they all look similar. And I wanted to make it so they all use the same colors. So I'm playing around with, how many colors are here? There's the hair, 1, skin, 2, and then 3, 4, 5. So 5 colors, and use them in different ways. And in all of them, I made the hair and the skin the same. So I didn't reuse the hair elsewhere, which you could. I mean, if there was going to be, for instance, like a belt here, and, well, she has a belt. But I could have, like, instead of making this orange, I could have made this the hair color, and that would have worked too. It would have tied in. But it was just a thing to experiment with. Okay, what if I keep the hair all the same, and then I just have these colors, and how do I vary the ratio of what color to use? So for instance here, if you were to say what is the most predominant color here, it would either be white or this like dark blue-gray. So yeah, I mean, you've got that as number 1. Then the next one would be the skin, for sure. Like these two, it's hard to say. The next would be the skin, and then the hair, and then the orange. So there's very little orange in this one. Whereas in this one, it kind of flips, where there's a lot of orange, and maybe these are more similar in ratio. But then the places I use them, so here, like the white trim. So on the boots, the white is the trim. Whereas here on this, the orange is the trim. Here, there's much less white and more orange. So yeah, just playing around with different things. Here, there's so much skin showing that actually the darker thing is the trim, the darker blue, and then the white is the skin is probably the predominant color, and then the white, and then the trim of the blue, and then the trim of the orange. So yeah, it's just a different exercise, and I wanted to give them all different feelings. So this one's like very sci-fi. Well, actually, a lot of them are sci-fi. I suppose this one looks more like a pirate, but even if she was in a sci-fi thing, you think it could work. And I quite like those types of designs, so that's probably my thing a bit more than like fantasy with huge axes and armor and stuff. So here I was thinking about composition. And I thought, well, who's good with composition? And if you watched the last episode of Pointy Chins, I guess it's only for patrons. So if you are a patron and you saw the last episode of Pointy Chins, you would have seen me doing ecchi compositions. And so I thought, well, who else is good with composition? And I've noticed Sakimi-chan always has pretty eye-catching compositions. So if I'm looking at a page of images and one of the images happens to be hers, I'll notice it. It stands out. So I wanted to see, what is it about it? So I kind of made these thumbnails and tried to break down what I was noticing. So here I was noticing that the hips and the butt and then the face are the focus. What do I look at first? I noticed she tends to do diagonals a lot. Like nothing's really straight up and down, even for this one where the character is sort of standing. If you drew a straight line up and down, things are kind of on a C curve. They're not straight up and down, actually. Even this one is not. It's at a slight angle. And I noticed that like the legs aren't symmetrical. So this leg is kind of, this knee is going up. So the bottom of the leg goes back in space. She uses bird's eye views a lot, especially for men for some reason. And there was a slight tilt to the figure, which I mentioned. The arms are often up and out of the page. I noticed that a lot. There's background elements that are often interacted with, which are interesting for the composition. Here's a diagonals thing. The hair acts as a compositional element to frame the figure. I noticed that bird's eye views are more common with men. And then there's a lot of this arms back and chest forward, and then it creates an S curve. And I noticed that when I was studying the etchy images as well, that you get this show off the assets thing, which I always felt kind of weird about, but whatever. And that I noticed there's a worm's eye view, which is used more with females. So what that does is it makes the female mostly more powerful looking, and it makes the guys look a bit more vulnerable when you have the bird's eye view on the guys, but a worm's eye view for the women. And so worm's eye view just means if you were a worm, you would be looking up and everything would look big and powerful to you. And if you were a bird, you'd be looking down, so everything looks small to you. Here, I thought it was hard to read things in the image, but the face and the chest do read. So I guess what I learned is it's okay to make certain parts unreadable so long as the main parts, the selling point of the image is readable. Here it was a similar thing with the arms, that they were hard. In the thumbnail view, it's kind of hard to see what's going on, but you could clearly see the boobs and the butt. And I guess that's again, it seems very strongly designed to just grab attention, which I think is, for the purpose, I think that's very intelligent in the design. Very practical. Okay, so this is just a guy. I was using the old brush, and it creates this kind of textury thing. This is a different personality that draws than this one, so that's why they kind of look different. So here I was exploring shapes more, and this again is a different personality than the other 2 days. So I was trying to draw, and I realized like each part of me draws differently. So what if I try to let them do more of their own thing? What happens? Because if I think of them all as the same thing, there's sort of me when I draw, how it is that I'm kind of watching, I'm observing myself drawing. So I'm not really drawing. And sometimes nothing comes out when I draw, so then I have to draw. And when I do that, I hate it because I'm like the least talented of the parts of me. And so it feels like, well, now I have to rely on analysis. And analysis is not my strong suit. I mean, it is, but sorry. Let me rephrase that. Sorry, my brain is kind of fried. Anyway, no. Analysis does not make the best art, I feel. I feel intuition makes the best art. And analysis is great, but without intuition, you kind of end up with stiff-looking things or kind of just okay ideas. I'm not saying these are very great ideas. I just think it's better than if you just are too analytical. So the idea was to try and run with more of a cute proportion, and here I tried drawing Wraith in that way, where he's all simplified. And there's probably, here's 1, 2, 3, 4. So probably 4 personalities drew this page. And I'll talk about that more later, I'm sure. And then on this page, trying to make dynamic figures, I made the heads bigger. I was noticing something about when you make eyes bigger, you have to make the head bigger, and then you have to shrink the body. And it's kind of like how with this face, for instance, it's not perfectly proportioned. I think I could do a much better job now. But anyway, the nose is minimized and the mouth is minimized. The eyes are accentuated. So the reason is that we look at eyes first. So there are certain elements of the body you look at. Just when you look at people in general, it's just biologically, like there's biological reasons for doing this, or evolutionary reasons, I should say, survival reasons, where we tend to look at people's eyes because we get a sense of, well, is this a friend or a foe? What are they thinking? You can get a lot from looking at someone's eyes. You also look at their hands because their hands are doing stuff. And you want to know, like, wait, are your hands in a position that they're going to attack, or are you hiding them or something? So eyes take a huge proportion of attention, and so do hands. So by making the hands big and the eyes big, and then even the head, because the head, we look at the head as overall, the mouth also determines expression and stuff. So making those big for humans, it makes sense because that's what we look at. Maybe if we were an alien, it would just be like, well, why did you make this particular part of the body so large? But as humans, that's very telling of what is important, which is why it helps making heads big and minimizing the body, because the body is a bit less important in terms of conveying what a person's going to do. Like, that's not true when you're actually fighting. When you're fighting, you tend to look at legs a lot, and you want to see where the person's putting their weight and their balance, because if they shift it, that's a giveaway of where they're going to move or how they're going to attack. But anyway, it's just trivia. So yeah, I did these. I like this kid. He's got a nice gesture. I like the flow. So this is kind of going not super sharp. Like, some of these are sharp. This one's super sharp. Or I wouldn't say super, like extremely, extremely sharp. I still think I could have made it sharper. It is based on curves, but everything is based on curves. And this is where sometimes people get it wrong when they try to mimic my style, and they, or a lot of it is parody, when they're just making fun of my style and they make everything pointy and they make it with straight lines. Kind of like how this has straight lines and it's all pointy. The thing is, the actual style is built off all curves. It's just, yes, I sharpen it after, but it starts with a lot of S curves. So if you build it without that in mind, everything's going to look super stiff. And in my view, it just doesn't look right. So I took this guy and I used him for some color studies. So I fleshed him out a bit. And the trick, or not the trick, the purpose of this was I wanted to get colors that kind of didn't work. So for that image where I did the like teal hair and the orange and the darker skin and whatever, that kind of works because those colors go very easily together. It's a very safe color choice. So for this, I wanted to be a bit more experimental. So for the beginning, I did do a more cliche version, very similar to that other color scheme I used, except there's less white. And then I threw in this pink. And the thinking is just trying to figure out, how can I make colors work when I don't think they'll actually work? So for this one, it was fairly safe because everything's kind of pastels. But this one I was more taking a risk at, because I had to get I tried to use a very saturated pink, but also a very saturated yellow, and make them work. And they did work. And the way it worked, I think, is because I contrasted them with the blue, but also yellow and pink are kind of close on the color wheel. They're not that far. So I think you can get away with it. So then, this type of color with blues and reds, these are quite far on the color wheel, but this is also a bit more desaturated, and the red's a bit more desaturated, so I think it works as well. And it's paired with a lot of neutrals to balance it out. And then there's a bit of yellow for an accent. This reminds me a lot of like the 90s JRPG colors, that they'll often have main characters in different colors, but you can always tell who's the main character because everyone else is kind of muted, and a lot of earth tones. But in the main characters, they're very easy. So here I wanted to do very dark skin, and I used these colors, and it gave it a sort of a tropical feeling. And I'm not used to just, like, here's red pants. I know people wear that and they can pull it off, but I've not been brave with colors in that way. But I'm kind of proud of all of them, because I feel like I managed to get them to work, and then it just becomes personal taste. And I think that's where you want to be with designs. You want it to be that it's a strong design, and whether someone likes it or not is only about their taste, and not like, well, these colors don't work at all, they're all clashing. That's bad. But if it's like, no, the colors work, I just don't like them, that's fine. That's completely acceptable. And then here, just playing around with more colors. Here, I'm just drawing scribbly faces and trying to use the pencil more. So here I'm shading, but I want the pencil to show. So I suffer a lot with presentation, making things look good, making them look finished and professional. I'm okay with general ideas, but not so good when it comes to like making artwork that just, it looks like a professional did it as opposed to just like an amateur. And I think because I don't really care about that myself, like I'm fine with very scribbly or very sketchy drawings, and I prefer pencil sketches to pretty much everything else. Like I really like oil paintings, but I also like pencil sketches probably just as much. And so because I don't value presentation myself personally, I tend to be crappy with it because it's hard to care about something that you don't. But yeah, that's what I'm going for here. Yeah, let's try to think a bit more. Again, different personality, and here's a more analytical one, trying to stick some of the anatomy stuff I was learning. So this is all stuff. I watched a Ray Bustos video, and I recommend Ray Bustos a lot. And this is just trying to do it from memory, to remember as much as I could without looking it up, which I don't think I remembered everything perfectly, but it is easier to, or rather I'd want to cement things. And then here, something he talks about is the M of the back, which is formed from the traps and the lats, and then this gap in between, which is called the triangle of auscultation or something, I guess. I don't know, but it's a thing. So, okay, fine. A landmark that can help. The back always confuses me. I've learned it so many times and I always forget it. I forget all the little muscles. I know there's like rhomboids underneath everything, and then I don't know. It gets confusing. All right. So this was kind of to call it a hard day would be an understatement. As you know from, if you watched the last episode, and if you haven't seen the episodes, if you sign up on Patreon, you can actually watch pretty much every single episode to this point. So that's a thing to maybe check out if you're interested. But anyway, I was suffering a lot with this whole personality thing, different parts drawing differently. And in this day, nobody showed up. And it just felt awful. Like I was trying to draw and I felt like I couldn't. And I couldn't remember how to draw, and I forgot a lot of anatomy, and I hate when that happens because it just feels like sometimes I can draw and sometimes I can't. And people have said that to me as well. They're like, I've heard it before where people say, oh, sometimes you're like the best at drawing and sometimes you're really crappy and you have such a big variance. And I feel that. And so I was like pissed off, and then they started laughing at me for being pissed off in my head, and that really pissed me off because it felt like you're not helping, you're just he won't show up. And anyway, that was pretty annoying. So then the next drawing later in the day, things were okay. I guess they got a bit better. And what I was learning, though, is that, well, here's what I learned. They don't show up if I want them to, or if I have too many ideas. They just do what they want. So if I feel like, oh, I want them to draw this thing, they won't necessarily show up. I also found out there's a limit on how long they're out, and they all draw differently. So there's one who draws with very hard pressure. He presses very hard on the screen for this one. And there's one who draws lighter. There's one who sort of does it in between. And they all have an amount of energy that they take up. And I'm the one doing the shading. So yeah, so they drew stuff. Different ones drew stuff first. And then I can shade because that's kind of not that difficult. And then here, just some drawings from reference. Yeah, these ones are referenced pretty clearly. These ones are not. I like this guy. It's kind of interesting. And then here, I wanted to show more about the personalities because I was trying to discover this myself. Like, who is doing what? And first I called this one the anime personality, not because he necessarily draws anime, because this isn't anime per se, but it's more like a young one. I imagine he's like 15 or something, because that was around the age when I was very much drawing this type of stuff. Then there's like a continuous line one, and there's this one, which is me drawing after, and I'm trying to mimic this one, but you'll see when I try to draw, it's a bit more stiff. I don't know if that shows up, but this feels a lot more free, and then this feels a bit stiff and a bit like try hard. And then there's this one, which is when I completely run out of energy, and it gets a lot more abstract. And this is the one that draws in my black sketchbook. And I think this can work for people who don't have like multiple personalities as well, because I think everything I have is probably just an exaggerated view, an exaggerated condition that other people could access. So if I was to say it, like, this would be more subconscious, this would be more analytical, and this would be more intuitive, and the subconscious one is also extremely intuitive. And then I was letting them draw their things. And one of the things I do, which is probably a mistake, and so I'm trying not to do it, is I'll look at what I'm drawing and I'll kind of criticize it as I'm drawing it. And I might think like, well, that looks off, so let me fix it. But I realize every time I'm doing that, whoever the intuitive one is that is drawing will probably stop at that point when I start judging and criticizing and like, oh, this is wrong, this is off. So I realized, well, even if it's off, it still looks cooler than the stuff I do analytically. So maybe it's just better to let them do their thing, even if it's wrong. And then after they're done their picture, then I can criticize. And I might be left with an incorrect or an image with lots of errors, but it might have more energy. So the anatomy on a lot of this is just bullshit. It's very bad. Like, this doesn't work in terms of like anatomy, structure, form. It's a bit broken, but it does have a bit of energy. And so does this one. So does this one. I like this one actually quite a lot. This guy here. So, yeah, like the big lesson is to let the parts do what they want. All right, so here's a video of me kind of showing you the way I was drawing some of these things. And mostly it just starts, with an idea of something, but it's just, I don't know. It's a lot more start with a head and go down, I guess, than I used to do, because I used to really put in a big gesture. But I think after a while, you get a bit better at sensing where the gestural lines should go. And so you don't necessarily have to build it so much. And here, I'm just making some shapes so I can fill in the gaps for the page. So I start with like an abstract shape, and I just fill that with whatever fits in the shape. So I kind of like the dude with the tie, because that fit. And then right now I'm just drawing another kid with shoes that I kind of like. Yeah, so hopefully that gives you some insight into the method. Here's again the random shapes and building from there. So this is very much continuing in the same ways I did before. Same way of like shading and stuff. And you can see with the shading, the texture is there because I basically use the lasso tool to select around an area, and then I use a pencil, the side of the pencil, to fill that in. And then I reduce the opacity to, so first I fill it in with pure black, and then I reduce the opacity to 27% because I like the number 27. I like the number 2, 5, 7, 0, and then any combos of those. But you still get a bit of texture through it, and that's pretty cool. I like how it looks anyway. Very bad for my hand, though. Very bad for my wrist, but and because of that, I couldn't do it forever. But it was okay while it lasted. I like some of these figures, and I'm getting more comfortable with letting them do what they want to do. And then here, I had to drive back home to Vancouver to my parents' home for a few days. So driving is pretty tiring. It's quite a long drive, but also I have like problems with my leg and back and stuff, so can't really drive for long periods. But anyway, the point is my energy is very low. So I understand that, and I'm trying not to do too much. So here's also at my parents' house, and different personality working. So just letting him do stuff again with the old brush. Not sure what to make of this. I don't know if it's good or not. I can't really judge these ones too well. In this one, I was using the same shading method as I had before, but I forgot to make a new layer. So normally I do the shading on its own layer, and then it's at 100% opacity. I reduce it to 27% opacity, and then it looks like this gray. But here I ended up accidentally doing it on the same layer as the line art, which meant I can't reduce the opacity, so it turned out black, which I don't know if it's okay. I think this one is still okay. This one's sort of trying to capture what one of my relatives feels like. I think it kind of does feel like the person, so I do like this one just because it's like, yeah, that makes me laugh. And this was the same thing. We had like a family dinner thing, and they're not what the people look like, but they're what the people feel like. Because I don't have a visual memory in a way. I can't remember what anything looks like. If I close my eyes, I don't see anything. I think it's called aphantasia. But I do know what things feel like. So I can draw something and it won't look like the person, but it kind of feels like them. And this is kind of, yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. This one's awful. Don't know what I was doing. Very stiff, crappy gestures, too many straight lines. Just, I don't like it. So this one I kind of do like, not this pose, but I like this guy. He's funny. I tend to be a lot more forgiving when I do caricature-y stuff, and like I forgive myself more for making a bad image, whereas when I try to do something cool or technical, I just hate on myself. And that's not healthy, because you really have to think that what is going to make you better at drawing? And the answer is pretty simple. Just drawing. Like drawing more, or drawing with more attention, or more focus, more knowledge, more care, or more passion, and stuff like that. So is beating yourself up gonna do any of those? Is it gonna make you want to draw more? Maybe in some kind of angry way, like where it's like, God damn it, I have to draw more. But I feel like that energy runs out very quickly. You can do that for a while. Like anger is a pretty, it's kind of like, it's not super useful in terms of long-term stuff. In the short term, it can be great because angry energy, you know, you have a lot of adrenaline. You can do stuff pretty quickly, especially if you don't need to think much. It can be fine. But when it's a big goal, like I want to get better at art, constantly being angry is quite counterproductive. It's better to have fun. It's better to be in this type of positive and light energy level where you're just drawing because you like drawing. It's fun. And doing what you like to do and not judging yourself so much. And then you'll just get better. You just get better by virtue of making attempts and making fixes and experimenting and playing. That's where I like to be. So here it was really hot. And this is in August. And I think I got heat stroke. I think Fluffy got heat stroke too. So the thing I was trying to do was to let the drawing feel like how I'm feeling, which is pretty bad. So they're all kind of melting. This guy's like, so yeah, I kind of like those. And again, this stuff comes from acceptance. It's understanding that, okay, you don't feel like you can do a good drawing. You can't do a technically refined drawing. But maybe you can do something that is just more expressive and shows how you feel. And I feel like for non-artists, they respond a lot more to that stuff because it's not just about how you're saying something, but it has a lot to do with what you're saying. Whereas if you're only doing studies, it's much more about how you're saying things. Like, oh, did you use nice line weight? Did you get the proportions right? Did you get the anatomy right? How are your values? And it's like, well, that's all well and good, but that's very cold as a motive for making art. Whereas something like, I wanted to convey how melted I felt in my brain from the heat stroke, and this shows that. To me, that's a better motive. And I think it's very important to make sure you're hitting the technical side, sure, but also the other side. And you can get things like analysis paralysis, where you draw too much for technical reasons, and then you forget what it is to draw for yourself and just, being free. So try to do both all the time. People say, should I be doing studies or should I draw from imagination? The answer is always both. Do both studies and draw from imagination. So here, playing around with different shapes. I think I drew these kind of out of order. Like I did this one that maybe I went down and then I went this way. I like these ones because they feel more fluid. The shapes seem nicer. And these ones feel a bit stiff still. So, not super, they're not super terrible, but some I prefer than others. Here's another one where I wasn't feeling good at all. And this happens, and I'm just letting myself feel bad, but express it. Like, try to express the feeling that is inside. So more of these cartoony type things. I guess you could say it's the anime part, but yeah, if you look at this, it's not super like other anime. I feel it's a bit different. And then here, I was doing some Wraith characters, and I wanted to redo them in the more anime personality style. So what does he do? Well, he tends to make the eyes bigger, minimizes the nose, pushes the nose up, makes the mouth smaller, and simplify the rest. Keep the head bigger in relation to the body. So in this case, it's quite a bit bigger, and it almost reminds me of the designs in games like Final Fantasy Tactics or Tactics Ogre, things like that. And so here's Rhea. She's a goddess of drink and just drinking. And here's Avencia, the goddess of blood. I wanted to give her the different poker thing. It's like a syringe, but I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how the design should work. So the blood extractor. Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly how to make that work. And here's a little wraith. I think he's kind of cute. So this led me to think about the style as a whole and really let the anime personality do what he wants. Like, oh, you want to draw in this cute style? Sure, go for it. Whereas what happens with me is I get different people who like my art for different reasons, but the one that gets seen the most, or the one that gets the most approval, is when I draw very realistically. I shade realistically. I use reference, or even if I don't, I try to make it look like I did use reference because I try to make everything correct, and I render it. And people don't really like or aren't responding as much to. There are people who do appreciate it, but they don't respond as much to the simplified style, which takes just as much work. It is by no means a easy, oh, you're drawing an easy thing that doesn't require any thinking. It's like, no, I still think about anatomy. It's just, how do I simplify it? So for instance here, which muscles do I choose to exaggerate and which do I choose not to? But the muscles are still there. Like here's a bicep, here's a brachioradialis, here's the extensors, pecs and whatnot. So the knowledge is still there. And I think when people look down on anime type stuff, they look down on it because it's so simplified that people can learn to just copy it by rote, by, let's say this one, right? I could see that because there are only a few lines here, someone could just memorize or draw, trace or copy until they memorize these specific lines. And then just redraw that over and over again. And you could say, oh, well, they're not very good. They're just copying this simple style. But making the style requires you to actually know stuff. It means you have to understand anatomy, and then you have to simplify it. So for me, I really look up to simplifications. And I don't like so much when people are just copying someone else's style, but I do like it a lot where you build a style from fundamentals. And then if that style is very simplified, that's fine, that's cool. But anyway, there are a bunch of different ways of approaching that. You could copy someone else's style and then learn fundamentals along the way, and then kind of incorporate it. For instance, you might learn like, oh, I copied this arm thing. And then you could learn anatomy after and learn like, oh, that's actually a muscle called the deltoid and it does this thing. And so either way works. There's no one right way to do art. But the main thing I got from this is I was working on this chunky and cute style, and I realized that if I just let my kid self, I guess, because I call it the anime personality, but it's much more like my 15-year-old self or 14-year-old self. Or maybe I'm trying to entertain a much younger self. But if I let him do what he wants, it feels fun to draw, which is something I don't usually get. It's actually quite annoying for me to draw. It's a thing that I know I have to do. But I guess because I do it all the time, it's hard to remember that it's something I like to do, and it's something that's very taxing because I'm always trying to get better. So it always feels like work, like, I need to do this. Whereas when I draw in this chunky way, I have a lot more energy. So I was letting him do that and just going with it, not saying, even though people like realism and they like rendering, I'm not going to bother with it. I'm not going to try to make things realistic or rendered. And that was helping. So I continued, wanted to draw different expressions. I'm not happy with this, but one thing I didn't know is this style is very limiting. There's not a whole lot you can do in terms of subtlety because the noses are so minimized. For instance, I can't make a bunch of variety, like different noses, or at least it's harder to make big changes. I noticed that the colors get a lot more saturated, and if I don't make them saturated, they look kind of weird. So here I redrew Mesra, but in this more chunky style. And I like it. I think it works. And yeah, I had to make the colors more saturated, but that also let me understand certain things. So, for instance, I had been thinking about older coloring styles, especially in the 90s, where everything was hyper saturated. And it felt like that's just because they don't know colors, right? And whereas you look at fine art and it's like, well, it's all subtle, it's very muted, colors are gradually going into each other. You really control your saturation. A lot of it is a symphony of grays and browns. And so it seems in a way that, well, people who do extreme colors just don't know what they're doing and they're just using colors like a child would pick. But that's not exactly the case. It's also that when you simplify and exaggerate a style, color is another fundamental that gets exaggerated. All the fundamentals get exaggerated. And exaggerated or minimized, one of those two things. So either it's more subtle or it's less subtle. And yeah, so with the nose, for instance, you're simplifying it and minimizing it, but with the eyes, you're making it more. And with the colors, you kind of punch them up. There are ways of doing it in a very pastel way, but you're still using a much more chroma in your, like a much more colorful color usually than if you were doing realism. And that's not because the colors are bad or you are bad with colors. That is because it's what works for the style. So these types of things I felt were good to discover, but also it puts you, here's a galoo, which I don't like, but anyway, it puts you in the spot where it's really hard to express what you're trying to say. So I spend a lot of time thinking about certain things and also playing with them and building them from scratch. And then I'll see comments about people talking about anime or manga, and it's a lot of simplification, but it's over many decades. So you might have had people who started from fundamentals and then took it to a style. But then you have people who start with that style and then take it to a different style. And then people who take that style and then take that further. And then people who study fundamentals and then learn that other extreme style and mix the two. So it's very hard to find who actually knows stuff and because they learn from fundamentals and who learned from copying someone else who copied someone else who knew fundamentals. And you can add fundamentals back at any time. So for instance, looking at life, drawing things that exist in the real world. For me, I'm coming at it from scratch because I started with stick figures, and then by learning these things, it teaches me a lot about how styles formed and why they did that. Like, why is it you have big eyes and a small nose and a small mouth? Why is it your heads are oversized? Why does that work? Why do chibi characters work a certain way? Anyway. So here, when I draw like this stuff, so this one isn't the same personality. This is me trying to draw the anime style personality, which is coming off very analytical and very shitty. So I apologize for this. But when I draw as the anime personality, he presses very hard. And when shading, it's also really bad on my wrist. So I kind of screwed up my wrist at this point. It wasn't super bad, so it's not like tendonitis where I let it get to the point that I would be screwed, but I've seen enough people who were screwed for like 6 months they can't draw, and turning doorknobs is hard and things like that. It's like, I do not want to go this route. So I changed the way I was holding my my Apple Pencil, and I was drawing very far back and using only arm movements. So I locked my wrist, and because of it, I couldn't get any details. Like, all the lines were very soft. But the point was, either I can keep doing what I was doing, maybe have results, and then break myself, or I can just try to not use my wrist and let my wrist recover, and then go to a thing that's a bit more careful. But draw as I used to, but be more careful. So I was resting my wrist, and I found as I drew holding the pencil differently, different parts of myself came out. I like this one. It reminds me of, I think he's called Ashley Riot from Vagrant Story. And then here's a black sheep-like guy. Here's a wraith thing. So yeah, using the side, here's circle, just trying to draw circles, but with the side of the pencil, and they come out like this. And then here, so I had that cute and chunky style. And then I realized I also like it when it's wide. I like things pushed wide. And a lot of my tastes, I tend to not follow through with them for whatever reason. I think they're stupid, or I think people are going to judge them as being weird. But I decided the theme of this month is figure out what you like to do and do it even though people may think it's garbage. And so what I wanted to do is allow myself to push this wide thing. So they're not just chunky and cute, but they're also pushed and stretched in a way. And I called it, here I wrote in katakana, I called it super wide. So there's a style called super flat, which is basically an extreme graphic design style where you try to make things look like they're kind of cut out of paper. And in this case, it's just made everything wide. And then I talked before about variation, right? Like, I don't like certain things that, I don't like how when you simplify a lot, you don't get as much variation. And you see this in anime a lot with same face syndrome, I guess you could call it, where everyone kind of looks the same. They have 5 different eye shapes that they just rotate. So I didn't want to be that. I wanted to add variety, and so I tried different features, different noses, playing around. Here's a more Roman nose, playing around with different eyes, more Asian eyes, the face, the head, trying to play with different shapes. And then I also wanted to play around with age. I didn't think I did a good job on this one with the age variation. I wanted to start with a baby and then take the same guy and kind of age him and see what happens. The eyes kind of move up and get thinner, or less tall. But these two don't really look like the same person. It's not great. So I feel this is a failure, but whatever. And I'm just showing my coloring process. So here I start with the basic sketch. I colorize the sketch. In Procreate, the way I do this is I use color balance and I go into the shadows. And then I just move the sliders into the shadows. Or in the shadow sliders, I move them around. And then I add some flat color, add a multiply layer, and I put in some basic shadows. And then for this one, I got rid of the lines. I strengthened some of the lines that I did want to show, and I used a few more tones. And actually, of all of them, I think I prefer this one. I'm not really a huge fan of the last one, although I think it does look quite presentable, or maybe more presentable. I told you I struggle with presentation. And more drawings, kind of like this one at the bottom. Just the shape is interesting. And here, just some head notes that I learned about from Ray Bustos. So the back of the skull, the furthest part out lines up with the eye level, which is very interesting. The bottom of the nose and the back of the cranium line up. And there's an angle here from the eye to the middle region here. And then the neck kind of starts from there, which I kind of knew about that one anyway. Digastric plane, I know about that. And basically it's this underside thing, which helps. But yeah, this is the type of stuff I learned from Ray Bustos, which is why I think he's so cool. Trying really hard not to force anything and just follow what feels good. So even what happens with me is I'll come up with ideas or theories and then I get too abstract with them and I forget the point. So I might tell myself I like drawing things wide, and then I'll just start making everything wide for no reason because I forget that it detaches itself from this is something you like, and it just becomes, this is an idea called wide. How do you push it? How far can you push it? But anyway, yeah, I'm kind of okay with these drawings for the most part. Here I tried to do a cami. So I've toyed with the idea of doing fan art for a very long time. And every time I started, I would always run into problems where I just didn't feel like I was enjoying myself at all. And it made me want to quit. But I keep thinking like, well, but if I could, that would be good. It would be a good way of showcasing what I do and showing my style in a way, but getting people to have a character they already know. And so it would be a bit more accepted in a way, I thought. And so that's this. Tried to do cami just because the characters I draw have pretty thick thighs, I guess. And I thought she'd be a good fit, but I still feel like I like the sketch, but something about the way I did it, it's not perfect. So in this one, I'm drawing two fan arts. Here's Froppy from Boku no Hero Academia, or My Hero Academia. And yeah, basically I started using the pencil, and I use big movements, so I get the mostly, I mean, it's an Apple pencil, not a real pencil. But I use the side of it to get those fatter lines, and I use my arm, and I kind of hold the pencil near the tip so I can get those fatter lines. And then I just fill it in. I create a mask for the whole body, and I change the color of the lines to sort of like a reddish tone. That way it will be like a warmer line, and when I put colors underneath, it won't look so dead. Whereas if you start with black lines, they look really dead. So here, yeah, I'm adding some shading, again with a similar color as the lines, so it kind of is harmonized. And then here I'm doing Red Monica, who is from Battle Chasers, was a comic that I thought was really cool in terms of the designs and the art. And a few years back, they made a video game, Battle Chasers Night War, which revisits this. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do fan art, I might as well do fan art of something that I actually think is like really cool. So this is my tribute to Joe Mad, though. Of course, his stuff is way, way, way better. But yeah, I was lucky enough that he got a chance to see this image, and he seemed to like it. That was thanks to IB, and he sent him to my Twitter to show him the image, which was cool because it's nice to get acknowledgement. And here I'm doing some more drawings. I like this one quite a lot. I like how soft it is. And this one I drew, I was kind of thinking of the Froppy again, but making her like a normal person, I guess. I don't know. And I like this guy. He seems kind of douchey, but kind of cool. I like the proportions, like how wide his shoulders get. And here's a Yuzuriha Inori. I don't actually know who this is. I just looked up popular anime characters or something, and she was one of the ones that popped up, and I was like, all right, let me try drawing her. But I really didn't like how it turned out. I didn't show anyone this because I didn't like it. So here is another personality, and the much more like the Black Sketchbook one. Started out drawing this way, and then quickly lost it and switched into a different way of drawing. And like, I don't know how these are done. He just draws, and to me it looks cool, but I don't know how other people would take it. But I feel if there's a real artist in me, it's this dude, and then the rest is just kind of a technical exercise. yeah, here the anime personality seems to not be showing up anymore. I guess I just took it too far, or he got bored, or I don't know. Sometimes this happens where the more I do, the less I can do, which really sucks. Here's some figure drawings, because I figured, well, if I can't do stuff, I might as well go back to practicing my fundamentals and doing things like figure drawing. Here's some 90-second figure drawings. Nothing too great, but whatever. And then this is a character from Hunter x Hunter. Machi. I don't know how to pronounce this. Komasine? Komasine? I'm not sure. And yeah, some more drawings. Keeping things loose, energetic, and I don't know. I like this one where he's like on this, I don't know what it is, a plank or a board or something. Kind of looks like he's surfing. And just some, not affinity, sorry, Wraith stuff. Some ideas for Wraith. So here's another example of a page. And I started with scribbles, you might have seen. And the reason I do that is to warm my hand up. Sometimes I just do that in the air. And basically it's just a kind of like a stretching or getting blood in the muscle, which is, I mean, it sounds weird, but it's something you learn when you train to, I guess, do anything. When you have blood in your muscle, like when you move the muscle and it's got blood in it, it works better. So that's how works for the arm when you draw as well. So yeah, I'm just drawing kind of random poses, turning them into whatever, trying to incorporate like twists and stuff, like contrapposto. So if the legs are facing one way, I'll try and make the torso face another way. And you can do this. Also, you can think of it in terms of like twisting the pelvis and the collarbone so they're facing in different directions, and that usually gives you the rest. And this one, I quite like the energy of the arm movement, like the perspective and foreshortening and stuff. And I found that I could exaggerate a lot of the, or maybe leave out some of the detail, like leave it implied and it still works. So that was something that I was experimenting with, where, oh, actually you don't have to draw something finished for it to look good. And that sometimes just leaving things scribbly actually looks better and it conveys the mood better. And it's not just like, oh, I was lazy, I didn't want to draw, and so I just scribbled. It's like, no, actually the scribbles can help convey movement better than not scribbling and just drawing something really clean. And then here, just drawing random faces. So here's the next day. Or not the next day, sorry. The next drawing, same day. So I do 2 of these a day, usually one earlier in the day and then one later in the day. Just trying to get like some pose pretty bad, I guess. I don't really like it. But yeah. It is what it is. I do like that I can keep erasing and redrawing and erasing and redrawing. And I know that was something that I tried not to do when I was using pen and traditional media, because you couldn't. You would just end up with tons of like a big mess on your page if you just, like, how do you erase with pen? You'd have to put whiteout or something. But what I found is that drawing and erasing, especially if you're kind of erasing the whole thing and then redrawing it, like for instance, if I screwed up on the arm and I just kind of erase a little bit of the arm and then redraw it, I don't think that's very good. But if you erase the whole arm and then redraw it, I think that is good. I think that can actually help a lot in cementing what you know. So you're not just, erasing without thinking. It forces you to think more. I like this chick I made think. She looks pretty cool. So usually out of a page of sketches like this, there'll be like one or two I like. So in this page, it's the one with the two guns. In the opposite page, on the left-hand side, I guess it's the one with the girl with the foreshortened hand twisting her body. I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I think it's very good to draw a lot just so that you have choice, and then you're not just drawing one picture and then, oh, this is the cool picture I did, and if it doesn't turn out, then it's a failure. Better to just, have choice. And here I wanted to, I guess, analyze the style and figure out, like, how many heads tall is this? And I drew this to be about 6 heads tall. And then I wanted to draw a girl and see how tall she was. And I realized, it varies a lot. To use a very specific measurement isn't really intelligent because there is so much variety between things. So yeah, there's that. And these guys, I like this guy. Seems pretty cool. I like this guy's face. It's interesting. I like interesting faces. I like interesting proportions, interesting people. And yeah, here so what I do with a lot of the wide drawings is I'll draw them and they're not wide enough, so I kind of stretch them a bit. And in this case, I stretched it, but then I traced over, I copied that and traced over it to see, like, is there a big difference between when you stretch it? Because when you stretch it, you kind of screw up some of the proportions, and you screw up, like, for instance, anything horizontal, if you're looking straight on, that's fine, because everything gets stretched equally. But if this person's arm was out, for instance, and you stretch it, it's going to be a lot thinner. And then if it's going down, which will make it a lot fatter. So it's kind of hard. But anyway, I just wanted to see, is there a big difference between the two? One where I trace over the sketch that's stretched. And I thought it's not necessarily a good thing that I keep stretching stuff. I should learn to internalize it. So I have been trying to do that and internalize a lot of the forms. But I figure it's not bad to get used to seeing something, especially if you don't do it a lot, because a lot of style goes back to us not just seeing stuff we've liked, but stuff we are comfortable with. And sometimes, for instance, I like to use pencil, but I like to use pencil maybe because I used pencil a lot and that's what I had available. And I wonder, if I only had ink available and I only drew with ink when I was very young, would I like ink drawings? But I don't know. I think I just like pencil, even regardless of the fact that I used it or not, because I really liked sketches more than inked stuff. When I saw comics and stuff, I always liked the penciled pages, and I was never a fan of the inked pages. Here's a katana from Mortal Kombat, which I also don't like, so I didn't really share. But I do feel like I've gotten out of that huge slump that I had been in for months. It felt like months anyway. Maybe it was only 1 or 2 months, but it felt like, oh, this was painful, and things are finally looking up and getting better. So yeah, in the next episode, I continue with the progress and advancing the style. And yeah, I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.